On August 8, 2025, the celestial configuration from the wild 90s returns. It appeared in 1995 and in 1997. History develops in cycles, and astrology is exactly what shows these recurring trends and events. That's why today we'll be looking at what happened in those years, what correlates with the trend of this celestial configuration. This celestial configuration will bear its fruits, and the events we're going to discuss will occur roughly within a week before or after August 8th, 2025. And the first thing this celestial configuration indicates is that systems, rules, and structures will be broken down. So, what can these systems, rules, and structures be? First, it's the borders of states, and any attempt to violate them is, of course, a military conflict, because people will now want to break all that is established and concrete. The next structure and system will be faith, religion, and the people. And an attempt to violate this is genocide, conflict on religious grounds. For example, like in July 1995, when there was the Srebrenica massacre, where Bosnian Serbs led by General Mladic killed about 8,000 Bosnian Muslims. This was one of the bloodiest events after World War II. The next structure and system is the government, and an attempt to disrupt the government, that is, this system and structure, means overthrowing the government or organizing protests. For example, in July 1995, U.S. ministry offices and companies implemented massive security measures due to fears of terrorist attacks in the wake of the events in Oklahoma in 1995, and there was a sense in the air of don't panic, but things are bad. This shows that structures like governments, large organizations, and companies will feel vulnerable in August 2025. In general, such structures and systems include organizations, unions, and commissions. An attempt to disrupt such a system would be to demonstrate its uselessness, its obsolescence, and to hold rallies against it. If we go back to the Srebrenica massacre, at that time the UN did not respond to the events that were happening, and this led to a collapse of faith in the UN, that is, in the structure itself. The structure showed itself to be in a vulnerable position, which could happen again in August 2025. In other words, essentially, when structures, systems, and rules are being destroyed, then, in principle, we can expect chaos, and similar chaos will occur in August 2025. But it's important to note that, unlike in 1995 and 1997, in August 2025, another planet comes into play, one that is responsible for values and people's beliefs. This means that all these destructions of structures, norms, and rules, on the one hand, can happen because people have lost their faith. For example, just like back then when people lost faith in the UN. In other words, the structure of the system showed itself to be weak. As a result, people lost faith and became disillusioned. But on the other hand, there could be manipulation of humanity's value system, planting ideas in people's heads that are beneficial to certain interests, even though these ideas have absolutely nothing to do with lofty values. For example, someone might say, "This is our territory, we need to go against these people, and we'll rewrite history together." That's exactly how terrorist acts, wars, and conflicts begin. The next thing this celestial configuration points to is industrial accidents, which could involve the destruction of factories, plants, or mines. For example, on January 10th, 1997, there was a disaster at a factory in India. On February 3rd, 1997, there was an explosion at an Iranian military base. Dozens of people died. On February 7th, 1997, there was a major accident at a coal mine in China where there were dozens of casualties. But again, here another factor comes into play. Unlike in 1997 or 1995, a planet is involved that suggests that, due to an industrial accident, a man-made disaster could occur overall, environmental pollution, which could lead, again, to environmental contamination, or it could result in some kind of natural catastrophe. But on the other hand, this trend, this configuration, can be interpreted differently as the opposite, that nature will show its character, some kind of natural disaster will occur, and this will lead to an industrial accident, a technological disaster. And since we've already started talking about nature, of course, this celestial configuration also brings the likelihood of natural disasters. But not the kind where there's just a little tremor somewhere or a bit of rain. Here we're talking about quite serious natural disasters. This celestial configuration also brings the possibility of the destruction of historical sites and monuments, everything connected to historical heritage. Here, the destruction of historical heritage could occur. Let's take a look. On January 8, 1997, there was the Sumerian archive scandal in Germany, the exposure of facts about the destruction of old archives and documents, which symbolically speaks to the destruction of old memory and cultural systems. But once again, the planet of beliefs, people's value systems, immediately comes into play, and perhaps the destruction of cult, of historical heritage, could happen based on some even fanatical, perhaps fanatical, or maybe simply due to changes in people's values. Because of this, there will be destruction of historical monuments, landmarks, sites, and archives. Something like this could happen, or perhaps there will be some kind of scandal about the destruction of history that will be brought up during this period. And another thing is that this configuration could lead to the passing of elderly people, or the displacement of elderly people. And people might say that with this person, an entire era has passed. And since people's beliefs and value systems are involved here again, it really is possible that with this person, an entire value could disappear. After this, people might lose faith, or people might become disillusioned with someone, and they could turn against that person. This is something that could happen in August of 2025. So, which countries will be affected by this celestial configuration? It will have a negative impact on Italy. There will be complete chaos in society and culture here. In England, internal problems and crises will become very pronounced. In Germany, there will be issues with neighbors, borders, and rules of movement. In Kazakhstan, there could also be problems with the ability to reach agreements, with partnerships, and with certain contracts or negotiations. There could also be some conflict here. That's all from me. This was me, astrologer Sapega Anastasia. See you in the next videos. Goodbye, everyone.